Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts, says Wendell Berry. Do not let your heart be colonized by fear, by hatred, by confusion. You are the joy of life renewing itself, and joy is a radical understanding of our human spirit and possibility amidst it all, says Jack Kornfield in episode 295 of the Heart Wisdom podcast. The sweet and radical joy of living in the way. This episode was first filmed for the Spirit Rock Monday Night Dharma Talk and Guided Meditation on April 7th, 2025. If you are on YouTube, you can watch the video counterpart of the episode. And in this Dharma Talk, this crucial Dharma Talk at this time, Jack invites us all to walk the path of joy. If you've been following along Jack's recent 2025 talks, there has been something deep and powerful and political really stanchioned in each one. And in this, he invites us back into the courageous, radical, and tender act, the transformative act of simply being joyful. Joy as a service to others. Jack shares about his time at refugee camps and how, even though there's so much reason to be sad, they're not looking for people who are frightened, worried, or downhearted. They're looking for someone to bring a sense of uplift, of possibility, and of hope. There's a quote from Rumi that he brings up here, which for me feels like a personal call out, and I'm sure during this time it will hit home for many. It says, "Do not sit long with sadness, my friends. When you go into the garden, do you look at the thorns or the flowers? Spend more time with roses and jasmine." Now lately, I've been throwing myself a little pity party. In many aspects, life has not been going my way, or so a part of me thinks. But that part of me had the steering wheel. And I was going to spiritual community and singing, doing my thing, doing my work, going through my habitual rhythms, all the while just staring at the thorns, posting online about the thorns, telling my friends about all the thorns. And by the universe's grace, a beautiful dome was constructed for a MAPS conference where they had amazing art and DJs and Dharma talks from Jack's amazing friends, Spring Washam, Raghu Marcus, and a full Ram Dass visual audio dome experience. So this was a meeting place of creativity and spirituality and science and art and music and movement and connection. And even more than the habitual rhythms of going to spiritual community and doing my practices, this took me from a place of disempowerment, of looking at the thorns, to a place of joy and empowerment and expression. And this week, what I realized after weeks of sitting in my own sorrow was that the power of joy is one of the most radical, transformative qualities. Jack calls it a necessary, completely necessary factor of enlightenment, that we need joy to get enlightened, and that joy comes from enlightenment as well. He says, just like I experienced this week, we catch joy from one another. We can bless each other. We can heal each other from our hearts. So that is what I invite you into this week, is even despite everything going on in the world, recognizing that our joy becomes a beacon of hope, and that our joy is a form of service And wherever we go, whatever we're doing, whatever we're standing up for, whoever we're dancing around or walking past in the supermarket, if we have joy in our hearts, it makes the world that much brighter for ourselves and for others. And if we're not doing it for joy and from joy, truly, what's the point? Just a little bit of housekeeping this week. There are some amazing surprises to be coming down the Kornfield pipeline a little later this year. I'm very excited to tell you, but I can't right now. But what I can tell you is that the Year of Awakening, Jack's Year of Hangs, monthly live question and answer sessions online, along with some nice lessons and reflections to keep your year focused on awakening, is now 50% off at jackkornfield.com. The link will be in the show notes as well, and it's a really cool way just to connect with Jack each month and to vibe with other students and experience a fun new theme each month. Otherwise, please head to jackkornfield.com for a plethora of amazing articles, guided meditations, Dharma talks, and his Heart Wisdom podcast library. So there we go. I welcome you joyfully into episode 295 of the Heart Wisdom podcast, the sweet and radical joy of living in the way. May you be happy and healthy. May you be safe and protected. May you live joyfully, no matter the circumstance. And like my late Grandpa Earl says, may your heart be smiling. Namaste.
Okay, campers, let's begin. I'm seated here at my desk in San Rafael, California, and looking out across a bit of green grass to a crabapple tree in full bloom, and it's still before sunset, so it's beautifully lit. And one of the things about crabapple trees is that they have these amazing, gorgeous pink and white blossoms, and their green leaves at the same time. And so you get this contrast of green and white and pink all together in a kind of magic form. And then in the black acacia tree on the other side of our house on the water is a very big owl that hoots, might even hoot during our talk that I get to hear outside my bedroom window, especially when it goes out to fly about at night. It's spring, here, at least in the northern hemisphere. And I was reflecting on what to talk about tonight because the last couple or few months of teachings really had to do with politics and wise society and how we respond to all the craziness that's happening around us. And it felt important to complement that with a teaching on joy and what the Dalai Lama calls having a positive attitude. And joy is different than hope. It's a deeper knowing and a bigger thing than pleasure or happiness. In fact, it's one of the essential factors or qualities of enlightenment necessary for enlightenment and expression of enlightenment. Joy as a factor or a necessity for enlightenment. How's that? And it's so fitting in the spring. I think of the great poet Pablo Neruda's line, "You can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring." That there's something that wants to renew itself and bring beauty into the world no matter what crazy human beings, us, do. Now, a question, of course, is how can we have joy in these times when we've defunded the USAID and there will be hundreds or thousands or millions of people, many children, who won't have medicine for malaria or HIV, when we've defunded education and scientific research, when I was reading about it, the National Park Service took down the webpage about the Underground Railroad of Harriet Tubman, took her picture off and simply said something like the Underground Railroad is one of the most significant expressions of the American civil rights movement, and took about a whole page of leading people out of slavery and that whole transformation, all gone, as if it didn't happen. But of course it did. So how do we have joy when there's chaos, disruption, suffering in so many ways? Yeah. What I've seen in going into refugee camps is they don't really want you to be depressed. They have enough of that on their own. They're not looking for people to come in and be frightened and worried and depressed, but actually to come in with an uplift, possibility, and joy. I think about my dear friend Wavy Gravy, the cosmic clown who half a century ago at Woodstock, after a rainy night, following a lot of the great rock bands there, got up on stage and early in the morning and said, what I'm envisioning in the mud of it all, what I'm envisioning is breakfast in bed for 450,000 people. And their tents began to pass out food to as many people across as they possibly could. Wavy Gravy, as a clown wearing his red nose and his big clown suit and shoes, spent a lot of time going into children's hospitals, and he specialized going into burn units. If you can picture children who've been badly burned. And he would go in, and as he said, I would lead with bubbles. Before I even went into the room, I would blow the bubbles and start to laugh. And I'd get the attention of the children who'd been suffering so much. And then I'd hit them with jokes and playful things. We need each other. We really need to remind each other, as we did in that meditation at the end of Joy, that there's something immense that we're a part of. And that suffering is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of the Four Noble Truths. That we don't have to be so loyal to our suffering. I went out for the demonstrations on Saturday. In Marin, there were 6,000 people. In San Francisco, there were tens of thousands. And the feeling was so warm-hearted and joyful and peaceful at the same time. There were, of course, amazing creative signs. Things like, it's so bad, even introverts are here. Or, I'm not a sign carrier, but holy fuck. Or, history teacher against bad history. Or, I didn't grow up saying I didn't grow up saying liberty and justice for all every damn day to accept anything less. Jesus would be deported was one of the signs. And I've been giving out red cards in Spanish and English, or in Tagalog and English, on different languages, for those who are undocumented as a kind of protection. You can order them online. I've gotten some thousands of them. And they explain your civil rights. I do not wish to speak with you or answer any questions or hand you any documents based on my Fifth Amendment rights in the Constitution. I do not give you permission to enter my house based on my Fourth Amendment rights under the Constitution, unless you have a signed warrant with my name on it. I do not give you permission to search any of my belongings. I choose to enjoy and exercise my constitutional rights, and they're kind of a protection card. So here we're talking about some of the difficulties that are happening. And then you have Howard Zinn, the great historian, who says to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something of benefit. But if we remember the times and the places, and there are so many where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a positive direction. So is joy okay? As I again quoted from Wendell Berry, our great farmer poet, be joyful though you have considered all the facts. And I love looking at the book of joy of the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And there they are in their conversation. And they meet together, these old friends. They said, we laugh more easily and we cry more easily and we connect more deeply. And they got together, all the cameras are there. It's so joyful to see you. But said to the Dalai Lama, but hey, remember the camera's on. We have to act like holy men. And they both broke into gales of laughter. And then Tutu started teasing the Dalai Lama. All these people come to see you. You get more people than me. They come to see you, and you can't even speak English properly. What's the story? And they tease each other. But in the end, their message is to say, do not let the heart be colonized by fear, by hate, by confusion. All that's happened to the people of Tibet, in apartheid in South Africa, the enormous suffering. Why should I let them take my happiness, says the Dalai Lama. Why should I let them take over my heart? I love the image that I carry of Vedran Smolovich, who played his cello in the bombed out National Library of Sarajevo. And he would go during the war there when Sarajevo was besieged. And wherever there'd been mortar and bombing, the next morning he would put on his tux from his time in the National Symphony and bring his cello and play music so that people would not give up hope. And part of this is that we catch joy from one another. We can bless each other. We can heal each other from our hearts. Joy. Rumi tells us, do not sit long with sadness, my friends. When you go into the garden, do you look at thorns or flowers? Spend more time with roses and jasmine. And on Rumi's tomb, it's written, ours is not a caravan of despair. Welcome, lover of life, wanderer, worshiper. Even if we have broken our vows, ours is not a caravan of despair. Something bigger And this is really what joy is. It is the joy of life renewing itself, even though it takes a long time and it wanders through some pretty dark places. You remember this passage from the Dhammapada? Live in joy, in love, even among those who hate. Here's the Buddha giving you mainline Dharma. Live in joy, in health, even among the afflicted. Live in joy, in peace, even among the troubled. Look within, be still, free from fears and attachments. Know the sweet joy of living in the way. So joy is a radical understanding of our human spirit and possibility amidst it all. And I think of my teachers, Ajahn Chah, whose forest monastery was in the province next to Cambodia and Laos, where the wars were happening and the bombers and the fighter jets were overhead. I think of Mahagosananda going back to Cambodia after the enormous genocide and loss of the Dalai Lama after 50, 60 years unable to return to Tibet and watching the destruction of the culture. And they're some of the most joyful people I ever met. Loving, present, joyful. It's a radical thing. Yes, there's guilt. There's doubt. There's unworthiness. There's fear that maybe if you're joyful or loving, I don't know, somehow there's not enough goodness to go around. Or in some ways, we've learned to be loyal to our suffering, that we all have a certain measure of suffering that's given to us cosmically, if you will, by human incarnation. And we're called upon to meet it with compassion and a loving heart and joy. You know the great poem that I read so often from called the A Brief for the Defense from Jack Gilbert. And I won't read the whole long poem, but the lines, if we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of those living in deprivation. We must risk delight, not pleasure seeking, but deep delight. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. In defense of joy. So there are joy meditations, and spontaneously in deep meditation practice, when the mind gets very still and concentrated, light begins to arise. In the text, there are 25 kinds of joy, bliss and thrilling joy and cool joy, where the body just feels like it's a vastness of silent coolness, and joy of illuminated colors, rainbow joy. So many kinds of joy. I remember when I was a new monk at Ajahn Chah's and learning to meditate, and I was practicing walking meditation. I'd been there for maybe a month or two trying to find my breath and concentrate and crazy mind and learn how to go out on alms run with my bowl and not drop my robes in the middle of the street, which happened to me once. Just trying to be a good young monk. And I set a candle by 2 trees in the forest next to my hut, candle by each tree. And there was a little walking path that I'd swept on the forest floor. And I was walking slowly and mindfully, really concentrating. And then all of a sudden, I felt my body grow taller and taller, like I had taken a bite out of Alice's mushroom in Alice in Wonderland. My head was like up in the limbs of the trees, and I was filled with this lightness and joy. And I paused and I said, wow, this stuff really works. It was the first experience of that kind of meditative bliss. Of course, it didn't last, but it gave me something to to realize, okay, you're on the right path. Now, having a joyful heart is not about not caring, but something bigger. When you read the history of the years of the Buddha's teachings, there was injustice. There was a tremendously oppressive caste system, which he stood up against. There was people being enslaved. There were lots of wars, and he did what he could to help stop some of those wars. But that wasn't his main thing. His main thing was, as Ajahn Chah would say, to teach people to step out of the battle, to find in their hearts and their consciousness an embracing of life that's steady and loving and peaceful and joyful. I once asked Thich Nhat Hanh why he taught so much about sitting and smiling, because sometimes he seemed kind of sad to me, and I said that to him. And he said, that's why I teach smiling. He said, I've seen so much suffering. People killed, in his school in Vietnam. All these young people came to the school that he created for peacemaking that was attacked by both the North and the South Vietnamese. Young people he brought together who were killed, bombed, shot. So he said, I've carried so much grief and suffering. I have to smile. I've had to find joy. And you become, even in spite of the suffering of the world, you become a lamp, as he was. Gandhi put it this way. He said, I believe in the unity of all things. And therefore, I believe that if one person gains, the whole world gains. And if one person falls, the whole world falls to that extent. And Thich Nhat Hanh was one of those who gained and passed it along. But it's each of us. We become a make-weight. I think of that photo I had on my refrigerator for a lot of years of the line of tanks in Beijing. I think it was around the Tiananmen Square time. And that Chinese man, you all know that photo, standing in front of a line of tanks with 2 shopping bags of groceries, just gazing at them, and then them unable to move further because of his presence, his courage, his dignity to stand there and say no. So when I speak of make weight, it means in the old days, still now, when you go to many markets and you buy rice or mangoes or asparagus or whatever the vegetable or whatever it is, and there are the 2 pans, and they'll put the goods you want in one, and then the weights, half a kilo or a quarter of a kilo, and they come close to balancing. And then there's this little line of tiny weights. Sometimes they're in the form of little animals, little turtles or little birds or something. And they put a couple of make weights in, and finally the scales balance. It doesn't take much, these make weights, and yet the whole scale can tip, just like that man in Beijing with his shopping bags, stopping the entire, roadway filled with oncoming tanks. Doesn't always happen quite that way, in war and in difficult times. Sometimes that doesn't work and it's too dangerous. But if there's a shred of morality, a shred of decency, it's an extraordinary thing. And nonviolent standing up has incredible power. So there's a kind of inner courage that you have as a human being that no one can take from you. That child of the spirit, the original wonder and innocence, amazement, and that care and courage, because you know what's right. You absolutely know it. Pause for a moment, ask you to reflect. What is it that brings joy, even in difficult times? And what is it that brings you joy? You can think about it, walking in the woods, time with people you love. Here are some of the Dharma teachings that point to a deep level of joy. One of the things that brings joy is our integrity. From one of the Buddhist texts, others will be cruel, we shall be kind, thus shall we incline the heart. Others will be greedy, we shall be generous, thus shall we incline the heart. Others will speak falsehood, we shall speak truthfully, thus shall we incline the heart. Not very complicated. Reflect on it. We know this. Integrity. I love this story from the Christian Desert Fathers, translated by Thomas Merton. The holy abbot Anastasia had a very fine Bible on refined parchment with a jeweled cover. And once a certain brother came to visit, and seeing the book, made off with it. So that day when the abbot realized the brother had taken it, though he was sad, he didn't send after him, or for fear that the brother might add perjury to the theft. Well, this brother went down into the town in order to sell the book. And he asked 16 gold pieces from the buyer of antiques, who said, "Give me the book that I may find out whether it's worth that much." And with that, the buyer took the book up into the desert to Anastasius and said, "Father, take a look at this book and tell me, is it worth 16 gold pieces? Should I buy it?" And the abbot said, "Yes, it's a fine book, worth at least that much." So the buyer went back to the brother and said, "Here's your money. I showed the book to Abbot Anastasius, and he said it's a fine book, worth at least 16 gold coins." And the brother replied, "Was that all he said? Did he make any other remarks?" "No," said the buyer. "Well," said the brother, "I've changed my mind and don't want to sell the book after all." And he hastened back to the monastery and begged the abbot with tears to take back the book. But the abbot wouldn't accept it, saying, "Go in peace, brother. I make a present of it for you." But the brother said, "If you do not take it back, I shall never have any peace, for I've found here what I was looking for." And he joined that community around Abbot Anastasius and lived there for the rest of his life. It's your integrity unshakable integrity that brings joy of heart. Think of the situations in your life where it really matters and how you get boosted up and strengthened. It's also generosity, taking time and love and care and serving and being there for others. We get happy when we can give. If we can't give, it's a really impoverished life because we are knitted together. And the heart knows this. And our joy comes when we find our ways to give. Father Daniel Berrigan, an activist and, of course, a spiritual leader, said, "Sometime in life, hope that you might see the look on the face of a starving man when the bread finally arrives. Hope that you might have baked it or bought it or even kneaded it yourself. For that look on his face, where you're meeting his eyes across that piece of bread, you might be willing to lose a lot or suffer a lot or die a little. But that is what brings joy." Generosity, offering, serving makes the heart grow open. We know it and we can do it, especially in these times. Integrity, generosity. What else brings joy in our life? Gratitude. There's a beautiful website from Brother David Stendelgrass, all these teachings on gratitude. Gratitude of seeing the beauty of life itself so much. You know, after the Buddha's enlightenment, as the stories are told, and they are told often, one of the first things he did was to move a distance away from the Bodhi tree and sit for 7 days and gaze at it in gratitude for sheltering him. God and nature, feel the gratitude of the trees that are breathing oxygen, taking your carbon dioxide and feeding you, working for you, loving you. All around you, they're loving life by transforming carbon dioxide into oxygen. Look at the things in your life that you have. Look at the relationships. Look at the mystery around you. How can you not feel gratitude? One of my favorite books, and I've been rereading it lately, is Father Greg Boyle's Tattoos on the Heart. If you haven't read it, it's an astonishing book of stories of homeboy industries and who he's worked with over the years and all the suffering in the community. How many young people were thrown in prison, how many were shot, the gang wars and things. And homeboys in the middle of them showed another possibility. Come, join us. Step out of the gang. Come back when you're out of prison. We'll get you a place in the community. And one of the stories he writes about is a 19 or 18-year-old young man named Spider, who he said was raised in the village there, with his sister abandoned by his parents. And somehow they managed to get enough food and eat somehow. And then he came to Homeboys Industries. He'd been part of a gang and they were shooting at one another. And he said, "I can't do this anymore. I want a family." And he had this girlfriend. They got married. He came to Homeboys. And Father Greg helped secure him a job as a hospital orderly, moving patients and equipment. And he felt so proud of himself. They moved into a little apartment and they had 2 small boys. So Father Greg was driving and he saw a Spider out on the street, not so far away. And he said, "Here, I'll give you a ride home." And they talked for a while about his life. And he was thanking Father Greg for helping getting him a job. How's it going? And he says, I'm okay. He said, you know what I'm going to do when I get home right now? I'm going to sit down to eat with my lady and my two boys. And well, I don't eat. I just watch them eat. My lady, she gets crazy with me, but I don't care. I just watch them eat. They eat and eat. And I just look at them and thank God they're in my life. And when they're done eating and I know they're full, then I eat. And the truth, sometimes there's food left and sometimes there isn't. And he smiled and he says, you understand. It's a father thing. Gratitude, you can feel the tenderness in this. Just to be able to watch his boys eat and feel that he could care for them.